Okay, while people are still joining, we're going to go ahead and go over a few housekeeping items today. Welcome. We're so glad to have you. Just as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded, so you'll have an email that will be sent to you after this with the on-demand version to replay. You'll also be able to find that under the resources tab on the trakstar.com website, as well as all of our other previously recorded webinars. All participants will be in video off listen only mode, so don't worry, we can't see you or hear you. And if you have any questions that you want to ask, you can go ahead and enter it into the question pane so we can answer these at the end of our webinar, where we're going to be spending a Q&A session for about 15 minutes with our special guest, Dr. Travis Benge. So make sure you add those in as we go along. All right. And I am Hannah Benge, the Director of Marketing here at Trakstar. Today, I'm going to be uniquely joined by my husband, Dr. Travis Benge. So this is a first for both of us. He is a leadership coach and has his doctorate in leadership. So we invited him here today for this session to be a helper in our Q&A at the end of this. So we're really excited to hear from him. And we're going to go ahead and jump in, though, because I know we don't have a lot of time. Okay, maybe you've seen some of these news articles that have come up. I know for me, it's scary. All of the different concepts that are being posted in the media, quiet quitting, how to make sure that you're fostering inclusion, how to lead great teams, the uncertainty of the job, really climate and environment right now, given the economy. So given all of the stuff that we read in the media and our email, how can we create boundaries within our team? How can we be well equipped to lead great teams despite a lot of the uncertainty that may exist? That's really what I want to hone in and focus on today. Alrighty, but we're going to start with a poll. So let me go ahead and launch this poll right now. What have you struggled with the most? Finding engaged employees, keeping employees engaged, or re-engaging employees who have checked out. Now, you may struggle with all of these things at some point, but right now, what are you struggling with the most? All right, let's give it a few more seconds. Looks like we do have a clear winner, but a close second. All right, let's share these results. Okay, hopefully you can see these here. The leading piece that you guys voted today was keeping employees engaged. So we're going to talk about that. Let's jump into that right now. But first, I want to validate the fact that being a manager is not easy. It takes effort, it takes sacrifice. And we probably have all woken up at one point and said, okay, I'm finally here. I finally become a manager. I have a team. It's so much harder than I thought. It's really easy for the imposter syndrome to set in, and we can take our leadership role. We can try to align that with how we feel that we are as a subject matter expert, and if we're even qualified to lead a great team. Trust me, it's happened to me. It happens every once in a while when I get in a funk. I'm like, can I do this? But really, leading with empathy is a concept that has proven time and time again to be really a factor in success in leading great teams. And what does that mean? Let me talk about that journey. I broke this up into 3 different sections in the journey. I feel like it matters. Now, there's hiring, onboarding, feedback, and partnership. We're probably going to spend a majority of this webinar talking about feedback and partnership. And a lot of our questions submitted so far are around that. But I'd be remiss to not discuss hiring and onboarding and how critical those pieces are. But we'll touch on those briefly. So one thing we can look at is a resume. Does a resume make someone qualified? I believe the resume is not always the best judge of the best candidate. Now, resume does matter. Do not get me wrong. At Trakstar, we are a talent management solution. So we focus on the hiring, on the learning management side of things, and then on the performance management. So when I start with the hiring in this journey, what I really want to hone in on is the fact that it matters not only what's on their resume, but if they're a good culture fit. And we also need to consider the environmental changes when we're writing these job descriptions. So even before we start hiring, even before we post that job, are the job descriptions of what we thought we needed a few months ago still true for today? Are all of the accountabilities, all of the daily functions of that role still a good fit in where our organization stands today? So make sure you're considering those things when you're posting that job description. Validating the culture fit, I cannot reiterate this piece enough. Have someone on your team, even if they're not a manager, interview the person. Maybe this person will be working very closely with them. Maybe they won't, but it is a really critical piece in making sure that your team or other departments can work well with this individual that you're going to be hiring. We do also have a webinar on hiring best practices. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that today, but I really want to set the stage in saying the hiring piece is the first step in leading great teams. You have to have the right people on your team. Now let's progress on this journey onto onboarding. Consistency sets the stage. Now that you've hired that person for the role, let's talk about what it really means to onboard them. Now we know there's different roles. I have 12 people on my team, and I have a developer, a designer, a writer, I have sales development reps. And I think we can all say that every person on our team doesn't spend every single day doing the same thing. Maybe that they do. But we have an LMS system here, and I highly encourage you to incorporate that into your hiring and onboarding process, because you want to create an environment where your level of understanding is mastered. This is especially important in tech, where you really need to understand the products and not only new product features that are coming out. So onboarding is critical, but how are you going to progress their career and their knowledge at your organization? Healthcare, we know this is especially important with HIPAA, government, and then there are also different things that we really want to focus on as far as compliance. We have, as SOC 2 organization, we really focus on having our security really well mastered across our organization. And while that doesn't necessarily directly relate to talent management, it's something that matters to our organization. Diversity and inclusion is a huge thing as well. So keeping that in mind, that you want to set that stage from the minute that they're onboarded and continue that on their journey as they're on your team. Be engaged, but don't be a helicopter boss. As a mother of 6 kids, it's easy for me to be a helicopter mom and to try to not have that really be translated into my work life. But when you give your employees the freedom to really hone in on their skills, what they're good at, things that they want to try, and that they're continuing to learn more about, you really are empowering them to learn at the different paces, to bring to the table the reason that you hired them in the first place, their unique skills and their unique personality that makes them a good fit for your team. When you are doing this onboarding process, it's good to have a template, but you have to recognize not everyone's working at the same pace. For me personally, I only set onboarding for the first week because I have some people on my team, very fast learners. They can get that done in 3 days. I have some people that have gone into the second week. So try to reevaluate the last day of the first week. What do I need to push forward? What is some feedback that they have on the onboarding the first week and they really want to learn a little bit more about? Try to work at their pace. And this is also true when you're continuing to do advancement in their learning through a learning management system, making sure that they're learning at a pace that is sustainable and that's more importantly, keeping them engaged. And then finally, on onboarding, leveraging support from other departments to increase their understanding in your organization. For me in marketing, we are the voice in so many ways of the organization that people see publicly. And I really need to hone in on the product managers, the product knowledge, our support teams, our implementation teams, our sales teams. Are we leaning into the other departments at our organization to increase the understanding that we have, in our case here at Trakstar, or even of our customers? These are critical pieces in making sure that your employee feels comfortable, confident in their role, and more importantly, empowered. I want to just touch a little bit more on this onboarding process, because if you really set the stage good here, it's a retention play. There are a lot of organizations that have struggled to keep their employees and keep really good employees, investing in your employees from the minute you onboard them, and then also investing in them externally by sending them to events. Maybe they're attending this webinar today and your boss has empowered you to be here because you're an inspiring manager. It's a game changer for employees and for managers to be able to set that budget aside, set that investment for your teams to be able to feel empowered and to grow in their journey. All right. So I know I went through hiring and onboarding. So we're going to dive into feedback and partnerships. All right. So there are 3 pieces I want to touch on, and I want to try to stay a little bit high level because I know there's so much information and I really want to get to everyone's questions. Implement annual performance reviews. At Trakstar, once we onboard someone, we do a 90-day performance review. And this is a lot more informal, but it's crucial to make sure you're setting the expectations. So when you do that annual performance review, it doesn't feel as scary. There's been a lot of things going around about, wow, performance reviews, are they still a thing? They are. I've been at so many organizations where we never invested in performance reviews, and I regularly do them now. It makes a difference. You have to make sure that the expectation the employee has of their role, the expectation that you have of their role are completely aligned. Because managing a great team means that you give honest feedback and coaching tips, which can be really difficult for people to do. And when you have more of a formal annual performance review, it allows you that space to be able to do that and have that honest feedback and leverage what they do well, help them coach through some aspects of what they could maybe work on in the coming quarters. And it just creates a really nice, seamless environment for your teams and to grow that relationship with your employee. I really believe that implementing these annual performance reviews at minimum allows you to not only have that relationship building, but leading into that peer feedback and those 360 feedback. That for me can almost be more powerful than the manager to the employee communication. At Trakstar, in our performance management tool, we have a 360 feedback rating tool, which allows the manager to go ahead and request 360 feedback of other people in the organization. The concept of peer feedback is really crucial because it can be awkward for people to give that feedback, maybe in a regular meeting setting. And there may be people on your team that work closer with someone than you do on a daily basis. And it gives your team a voice to be able to share that feedback that is crucial to the growth. So having the 360 feedback feature in your performance management system can be really telling. Again, you can't capture the daily conversations. And so having the space for people to speak about that in full transparency is incredibly helpful. There's another feature that I think is also helpful, and I do a survey, the manager surveys, where I can customize surveys for my team, and I can send those out for them to completely be anonymous in their feedback that they have in these surveys. And I'm sure you're thinking, wow, Hannah, this sounds like a lot of stuff. But when you have a performance management tool or some sort of process that you can partner with your HR team on, it can be a complete game changer. I really can't iterate that enough. Regular one-on-ones are the last bullet point that I want to highlight here. And I'll probably spend the most time talking about this because I want to get in on valuing your employees. I have regular one-on-ones with my team. Managing performance is a lot easier when you're in sync. And I do those weekly. Yes, weekly. I know the concept of having a lot of meetings, especially if you manage 5 to 10 or more employees, you have the freedom and have to allow yourself the freedom to be able to cancel those if you don't have anything you need to talk about, if things are going really well. But those check-in topics should vary. Some weeks, maybe you're discussing a project. For me, it could be a go-to market launch with people on my team, stuff that's in the pipeline, personal goals, because goal setting is a really big piece in making your employee feel valued and a piece to retaining that employee. But it also means that you're just simply asking them how they are, what's going on in your life, what's new, Today, we spent the first 10 minutes of our team meeting talking about walking our dogs. And sometimes it really is that simple to just take those 10 minutes to enjoy with your team. You get to learn more about them. And that's where the empathy and understanding piece comes in, because when you can understand the personality of your team, you're creating that loyalty within your team and the engagement between your team, where you can break up those pieces of, hey, so-and-so mentioned this today, and I think they're really good at that. Let's really lean in on them. Maybe it's something that's outside of their job description, but you're, again, going back to the word empowering. I can't reiterate that piece enough. Empowering your team is also increasing that engagement within your team member. Again, just read the room too. Sometimes check-ins are crucial, maybe more than once a week. You may have a team call where you notice someone's being a little bit standoffish, their face, they're not really smiling a lot. And you can ask them, hey, what's going on? Maybe you need to add additional check-ins. Reading the room of your team and the tone and their responses, or maybe their reactions, is a piece that you really have to focus on as a manager. And then that goes into valuing your employees. So let's head into that piece right now. I want to give an example too of how your employees can feel valued through performance reviews. This is just an example of a performance review here at Trakstar. You have the ability on a rating scale to create and personalize your performance reviews, whether that's semi-annually, whether that's annually. Here at Trakstar, performance reviews overall have the same bones, but they also have a little bit different pieces depending on what department you're in. We know that a revenue generating department and maybe the engineer team or the development team, the core fundamental pieces of their role can vary. And so we believe at Trakstar, it's really important to look at all of those pieces and also align with the core values and the mission that your organization has, which is applicable to every single department. All right, let's jump in real quick to another poll before we get in on valuing your employees. So I just went through the employee journey and I just touched on 3 pieces, which, trust me, I know there's a lot more, but this is the piece I think is most important when we're talking about engagement. Where in the employee journey do you feel like you can improve? Is it hiring? Is it onboarding? Is it the feedback and partnership? Okay. It looks like we have a few more trickling in. All right, let's share these results. So 60% of you feel that you could improve the most in the feedback and partnership. This is not at all surprising to me, given the fact that that is, as I mentioned earlier, the meat and potatoes, as my grandma would say, of the recipe. It's a tough part, right? Because it's the day in and day out. The hiring and the onboarding, while those are just such momentary pieces, yet we may have to do them more than once. The feedback and partnership is really the long-term piece here, right? That we focus on with our teams. All right, let's get into the valuing of your employees. So there's a lot of ways your employees can feel valued. And actually, I think it depends too on the personality of the people on your team. I think right now I have the most diverse group of personalities on my team, and it's probably the most beautiful thing that I've ever seen in any team that I've led. And that was intentional, right? Because the people you learn from often happen to be no one like you. And I've learned that over the years, is that I learn from people that are so different than me. And that's why I hire people that are experts in areas, because they really help make the team better. So the 3 pieces that I want to talk about briefly before we get in our Q&A is provide opportunities for employees to grow. That really is focusing a lot on the onboarding piece when I say the retention play of learning management and investing in your employees, setting aside the budget for internal and external. For my team, we all went to a team conference last year. I wish I would have included a picture of that, but we learned a lot about each other. Being a remote first environment here at Trakstar, it was great to be in person and see how other people are and their personalities. And that was a really special thing, while also learning a lot how to be better in our roles, letting your employees express themselves in their work. I want to share a brief example about someone on my team a couple of weeks ago took some vacation time to go to a meditation retreat. And it was such a cool thing for me to learn from my employee that we implemented a week where we focused on what this particular team member learned. And we're like, hey, what do you think about trying these things? And we all learned from this particular person. And that was maybe just taking 30 minutes to go for a walk. And it wasn't necessarily work related, but we were able to share, what did we gain from that week? What are we learning from our team members? And it allows us to build that trust within working with one another. The piece I'm going to talk about the most, though, is making time for your team, holding weekly calls and giving your employees the chance to get to know one another and opportunities to have them lead and train the team through these meetings. As a manager, you don't have to know everything. In fact, I think it's probably preference that you don't know everything, because it's hard to carry the weight of everything. So you hire experts for this reason. I like to designate a couple weeks where I have people from the team, train people on the team, lead the meeting. So it's not just me talking the whole time, and we can learn from one another. Team bonding is probably one of my favorite things in our team time that we have. And there's a plethora of ways you can do this. There are a lot of free Zoom games that are out there, like escape rooms, puzzles, and taking an hour 3 to 4 times a quarter to do this with your team matters. It matters. Hands down, it matters. Some people like to do happy hours. Some people like to just have lunch and learns together. Several times a year, I'll send my team a DoorDash gift card so we can have a virtual lunch and learn. We did it for our kickoff this year. So budget these items in. Budget the external training opportunities, budget the opportunities to spend time doing virtual escape rooms. We did a gingerbread decorating contest around the holiday season. This breaks up the day-to-day work and allows your team to just breathe and spend time together. Alrighty, y'all, we're almost done, and then we get to the Q&A. So before we start talking about all the questions you guys submitted with my lovely husband, just don't forget that expectations matter. Acknowledge that leadership is hard, which means that it's okay to tell your team, I'm not perfect. Hey, I had a rough day. Sorry for my tone. Sorry for my directness. Sometimes it means apologizing makes you a strong leader and not putting yourself on a pedestal. You have to be empathetic and relatable, because at the end of the day, we're all coming to our jobs 40 plus hours a week away from our family, and this time together really matters. Set expectations regularly and clearly. I recommend quarterly. This can include Zoom and Slack etiquette, PTO request, the management of the tasks that your team has, the due dates, making sure that they check things off on their checklist regularly. We use a project management board, so that's something that I check and say, hey, are you keeping up on this? Accountability also matters, right? And so setting those expectations, knowing that you're holding them accountable, but you want to help them in doing so, makes a difference. And finally, setting goals. Set your team goals, gain alignment, set personal goals, gain alignment with individuals on your team, and talk through them regularly in the weekly one-on-ones. How are you doing on your goals? Looks like you hit this goal last week. Congratulations. Thank you so much for being a partner with me in these goal setting. And that piece is something that can also be built into your performance management tool as well. Setting those goals, and then also with your executive staff as a manager, making sure the mission and value and the organizational goals are in alignment with your department goals. All right. We're getting into the Q&A. Looks like our special guest is unmuting and turning on his video. Hey, Dr. Travis, thanks for joining us today. We have some pre-submitted questions that I think we're going to go through first. It looks like some came through in the question panel as well. So let's go there and try to tackle as many as we can in our time together. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks.
Looks like the first question that came in was, what are the most important qualities to look for when hiring new team members? Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. I think when you're looking to hire new employees, new team members, I break it up into two categories. I break it up into character and competency. The reason I do that is because I feel like to have an employee for a long duration, you need both. A team member with high level of competencies, but kind of low character, they don't feel like they're in it. They're in as a team player. They're just not going to last long term. Or vice versa, maybe high character, but they don't have the competencies to get the job done. You could be in trouble as well. And so, obviously job competencies are just up to each job role, what the role looks like, what you're looking for. But in terms of character, one of the big things you look for is humility. Just the ability to come in and the willingness to learn the company culture, not coming in expecting to change things overnight, but just the reality to come in with an attitude of respectfulness to others so that they have proper expectations and they come in and they do their job well if they show humility.
I love that. Isn't that the truth? Our next question is, what are some common mistakes that managers make when leading teams, and how can these be avoided?
Yeah, so I lead a team in my workplace, and you try to avoid all the mistakes you possibly can, right? I think micromanaging is one because it shows a lack of trust in the employees. If you feel like a person can't do their job, that's when you're going to micromanage. But when you trust them, you won't micromanage them. People not feeling appreciated, just the reality that you treat them more like an employee than a person. I think humanity has a need to be heard, to be cared for. And so when you're leading a team, you have to make sure that you care about that person outside of their work environment, right? I want you to do well in your job because when you do well, we all do well in our job. But if I don't care about you outside of work, and I don't care about what's going on in your life, you might bring baggage into the workplace, and that might be difficult as a team. Another thing is kind of when you're leading a team, oftentimes as a manager, you can get ahead of your team in strategy and thoughts and tactical approaches. So you don't want to run too far ahead of your team because you need your team. You need the buy-in of your team. And so often that's been a struggle of mine is you're an achiever. You're wanting to go out and get it done. But if your team isn't on board in that moment, not because they're being defiant, but maybe just because they don't understand where we're going, right? And there's lack of clarity there. You need to make sure that they're all bought in and don't just keep running and plowing them over.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, don't talk about my helicopter mom tendencies right now, but I think that goes back to not being a helicopter boss, and giving your team the freedom to use the gifts that they've been given, right? And the investment you make in them, let them showcase that. I love that. Our next question is, what are the most effective ways to make your people feel appreciated? I'll go ahead and take that one because there's another question that came in about when budget isn't something you can build or just isn't a fiscal option at the moment. How can you invest in growth opportunities more for your team? There are a couple ways that you can do this. And I certainly, for the person that submitted this question, I can touch on this a little bit more, but there are ways for you to publicly affirm your team. If you have Slack, if you have Microsoft Teams, we have a channel here we call Rainbow Unicorn, where we publicly affirm people at our organization. And that's important because there may not be the budget. There may not be the opportunity for you to give them a pay increase, but it is important for people to know how appreciated that they are outside of even your one-on-ones with them. But to make that effective, you do have to do that regularly. You have to regularly acknowledge their growth. You have to regularly acknowledge things that they do that you know are hard. And you have to create an environment on your team that you're not the only person doing that, where it's like, oh, my boss patted me on the back today, but that they're appreciated by other people in the organization. And so when your team sees you do that, I think that it can really just expand out a lot more into your teams as well, because you're setting that culture, right? And it really comes down to, how do you want your teams to treat one another? Is there anything you would add to that?
Yeah, just something that comes to mind when I think about how to make people feel appreciated is spending quality time with people and genuinely listening to people. Yes, there's times when you lead meetings and I lead meetings and we all lead meetings where you do most of the talking, and that's fine, but when we're wanting to make people feel appreciated, we spend quality time with them, whether it's one-on-one or in a group, because everyone has emotions, everyone has thoughts, and everyone has perspectives, right? And so people don't feel heard, they're not going to feel appreciated. They're going to feel like you only tell me the plan and what to do. I don't ever have kind of a say. And that can be really difficult for employees and can lead to turnover.
Yes, I cannot agree more. This next one I'm going to have you take, because as your wife, I know that you have been you've been criticized as a leader before. So the question is, how do you respond to criticism about your leadership? I think at times every leader has been criticized, whether it's directly or indirectly. So how do you respond to that?
Yeah, I think first thing, when you step into leadership, the first thing you have to recognize is when you're leading, there's people who aren't going to like it, right? And so you have to just come with the perspective of not everyone is going to like every decision I make. It's just kind of the reality. And that's just part of leadership. You just have to own that and know that going in. But I kind of lump criticism in two separate categories, right? Because you mentioned earlier about feedback. And so feedback isn't always positive. Feedback can be a negative feedback, but criticism to me is more like someone who doesn't want me to succeed, or they don't like the organization, so they're criticizing us as a whole, right? And so criticism is kind of harder pill to swallow than negative feedback or critical feedback, because when I get critical feedback, it's like it's coming from someone who I know cares about me. It's coming from someone who wants me to be better. And so to answer the question on the criticism part, when you hear criticism, you have to, first off, not put defense mechanisms up. Don't be defensive. You got to take it. And it may not all be true, but something in there may be true. Something in there probably is true, because the reality, none of us are perfect leaders. And so if someone's criticizing, yeah, maybe they're blowing it out of proportion a little bit, maybe not. We have to come with the recognition of, find the bottom line there, and what area do I specifically need to grow in? As a leader, we can never have the posture that I've arrived. When you come to the point that you've arrived, you kind of open yourself up to more negative criticism and feedback.
Well, honey, I think you've arrived. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, not close.
Oh, love it. I struggle to build consensus on my team. How do you align everyone?
Alignment can mean a lot of different things, just depending on the organization. But first, when I think of alignment, I think, is everyone bought in to the end goal? Is everyone bought into the mission and vision of where we're going? If people can buy into where we're going and where we're headed, alignment is easier, because then we're all operating under the same assumptions of what we want to see happen. So if you don't have that, there's going to be misalignment everywhere. But I think when you have the same mission, you have the same vision, you know where you're going, that's kind of your first step. If those pieces of the puzzle aren't there, you're already in big trouble. But if those pieces are there and there's still not alignment, you have to have open, frequent conversations and communication. You have to ask the hard questions. You have to resolve conflict for misalignment. Find out, why are we misaligned? Is it just missed expectations? There are people sitting in the wrong seats on the bus, right? You have to kind of, as a manager, leader, you have to figure out, why is it like that? And so it takes time to figure that out, iron it out. And it's just kind of taking the next step every single time, next step to better align yourself. And also, don't try to rush alignment either. Just coming out with a new mission or new vision doesn't solve alignment, right? It's a process that you take to ultimately get aligned.
Yes, that's good. We have just a couple more questions. I know we're already about 30 minutes in, so I want to respect everyone's time. But one of the questions we got is, how do you mentor new leaders? I want to definitely hear from you, but one thing I want to touch on that I have personally felt has been really successful, because I've had several promotions on my team and two people that have recently taken over a management of people position. And oftentimes organizations don't consider what they would do. And if an important employee suddenly left, and they're faced with immediate challenges there. And so that's where I think succession planning comes in. Yeah. So you want to consider, you should always have the mentality of like, can I coach someone up to do my job, right? But not that you have this fear that they're going to take your job, because really the goal in being a great leader is that they do, right? Like you're coaching them to do great things.
Yeah.
So I think succession planning really comes into that is having that experience from a senior leader and leading your team to invest into them, and also creating a really good framework for your organization in the event that an employee moves on from a job. Do you have a plan there? We have a white paper actually on succession planning that is super helpful if you want to check that out. But I do want to hear from you, Travis, on how you feel you can mentor new leaders, because you do that a lot. And in fact, you coach people to be leaders on a regular basis as part of your job.
Yeah. So I kind of take a 5-step approach system. There's nothing magical about it. Kind of the way I go about it is if I'm trying to teach someone to do something new, it's I do it, you watch it, and then we talk about it. And then after that, after we kind of get a gist of that, then it's I do it, you help me do it, and then we talk about it. And then the next one is we both do it together. We kind of partner in it, and then we talk about it. And then it's now I'm transferring ownership instead of me kind of being the driver. And then it's they do it, I help them, and then we talk about it. And then they do it, I'm watching, I'm step back from it, and then you talk about it. So there's not a timeline. You're just like, oh, well, this is a 3-month, and then this is 3 months. It just kind of depends on how fast people pick things up. But I truly believe that more is caught than taught. And so there's a lot of good things you can learn from lectures. There's a lot of good things you can learn from different training venues. But the reality is people need experiences. And so you can't just talk to them about the experiences. You have to give them valuable experiences in an environment where they're able to fail and you're able to coach them in order for them to grow as a leader. You can't just you can't manufacture leaders. They don't come off the press, right? I mean, it's difficult, it's challenging. But you just have to spend a lot of time and give people room to fail.
Yeah, that is actually our next question. Someone asked, when you make a mistake, how do you own up to it? I would say, do you want to answer this question from your perspective of as a leader in a position of authority in a lot of cases, how do you own up to mistakes that you do?
Yeah. So the reality is we have to have the humility to fail and to own up to it. The reality is no one's perfect. No one's perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect leader, a perfect manager. And so everyone is hopefully they're working as hard as they can. We're working as hard as we can. And you're attempting to make the wisest and the most thoughtful choice and decisions, trying to fulfill the mission of the organization. And in that, we're going to make mistakes and we're going to fail. And there's going to be things that you think are surefire and it's 100% going to succeed. And then it flops, right? That's just kind of the reality of the world that we live in. Sometimes we think our instincts are perfect and then something happens and it's all of a sudden it doesn't work out. So I think we have to have the humility to recognize that we're not going to be perfect and never are. And because of that, we have to be able to own up to our mistakes. In an organization, if you never own up to any mistakes, even though everyone knows you made a mistake, you're creating a culture that says you cannot fail, or if you do fail, you have to hide it. But that's not healthy. We have to create cultures within our organizations that say it is okay to fail because I fail, and when I do, I own up to it. But we don't want to just own up to it and just be like, well, I blew it. We want to say, hey, that fell flat, and maybe here's some reasons why. And that kind of goes back to the feedback thing. Here's some reasons why, and here's maybe what we could do next time. So it's not just sulking in, hey, I made a mistake and woe is me, but it's, hey, how do I learn and how do I grow from this? With a spirit of humility.
Yeah, I love that. Humility is a thing. It's a real thing in leadership. Our final 2 questions came in through the chat. The first one is, what are some creative ways to re-engage disengaged employees? That one depends, I think, on the season that you're in with your team. For me, this year, I felt like I was sensing that there was some level of disengagement, and of course, this could have been imposter syndrome that was happening. So when I went back to the meditation retreat that someone on my team did, I was like, what can I learn from this? And what I did was I implemented a full 5 days of no team meetings. Now, we still had to go to the meetings with the executives and other meetings that were not owned by our team, but all one-on-ones, all team-owned meetings were completely canceled for 5 days. This allowed the team to do a couple things. The first thing was what did they miss about those meetings? Did they miss that human interaction with the team? How much do they value their team? Were they able to take that extra time and hone in on something that they didn't know was meaningful to them? And we learned a lot. At the end, I asked everyone on the team, what did you learn from those 5 days? They all missed people, and they realized how important the engagement was between the team. And while that individual productivity is a very important thing, and I'll probably do that again, I felt like that was a decently creative way that was successful for me this year. But I do think it goes back to even having those times where you have conversations in your team meetings that maybe 15 minutes are talking about things that are not related to work. If your team likes sports, if your team likes the outdoors, lately weather's been a topic for our team. And we got some people in the freezing rain and it's hailing outside. And then, we got people in Florida and it's like 85 and we're just, having all of this conversation about the weather. And it just gives a break from like the day-to-day stuff that, again, like Travis said, we're humans, right? There has to be that relatable element. There has to be that human element that also is just plugged in to keep people engaged. Also, those happy hours I mentioned, again, those are some creative ways. I found this free Zoom game where people plugged in answers and they had to like color something and people on the team had to guess what they were coloring. It took us probably 30 to 45 minutes, but people were cracking up. And we were able to just walk away and be like, hey, we just did a fun thing. All right, what's the next thing on our plate? But it just broke up that time. I think you just need to give your employees seasons of life where it's tougher than others. We don't know what's going on in their personal life, but we should ask them about it. Not too personal, like, hey, how's your kids doing? How's your family doing? How's your dog doing? And checking in with them. Like, I think sometimes employees are disengaged because they feel alone. And so trying to plug into that a little bit. All right, our last question is how our company doesn't currently have peer or 360 reviews. Why do you consider them crucial to growth? I want to speak briefly to the 360 review piece. At Trakstar, of course, being a talent management software, we do believe that positive and holistic reviews across your organization are crucial. The traditional performance reviews I touched on earlier show a portion of the individual employee's impact. But with those 360 reviews, as I mentioned, managers and leaders get the full picture of performance, where it's not just coming from a small group of people in the performance reviews. You're able to have that tool that automates the reviews and the respondents and the employees, and it has those feedback surveys. It has the questionnaires that are built at Trakstar. They're built right into our dashboard. So it makes it super easy to collect feedback and facilitate the employee development, and then keep retention rates high through the employee experience by providing that real-time feedback. All right, Dr. Travis, that's all the questions that were submitted. What do you want to end us all with? Do you have any big note or
some like words of wisdom?
Yeah.
No, it just, as you continue to lead, just remember leadership is hard, but leadership is also a gift. It's something that many people desire, but once you get there, you recognize it's difficult and it's challenging. So there might be seasons you want to give up, seasons you want to quit, seasons where maybe your attitude is not all in, and you're treating people with love and respect and care. But try each and every day to recognize, hey, how can I make a difference in someone else's life? How can I model what I want them to be like in the workplace? How do I model humility? How do I demonstrate that to my team? How do I show care for them relationally? And I think if you do that each and every day as you wake up, I think that you will develop stronger, healthier teams.
Love it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. You will have a copy of this recording sent to you. It will be available on the Trakstar website under our resources tab. In addition to a lot of the resources I mentioned today are found under our resources tab. You can filter them by topic. There is a lot of stuff that we put out there on a regular basis because we believe in fostering those relationships, and your employees matter, and it's important to invest in them. So thank you, Dr. Travis Benge, for joining us today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and I hope you have a great weekend.